I'm a creature of habit. I work month-long dives, then check our accounts when I surface. So when I saw $50,000 missing and utility bills for a house I wasn't in, I knew my marriage was a lie. The crew boat's diesel engines coughed to life as I shouldered my gear bag, salt spray stinging my face in the pre-dawn darkness. 28 days at 300 feet had left my joints stiff and my mind craving something simple, sleeping in my own bed without the constant hum of life support systems. The familiar weight of my diving equipment felt lighter, knowing Megan would be waiting at home. "See you in 4 weeks, Torino," Carlos called from the boat's deck, already prepping for the next rotation. I raised my hand without turning back. Job's not done till it's done right, but this one was finished. Clean decompression, no incidents, another successful saturation dive in the books. The dock creaked under my boots as Galveston skyline emerged through the morning haze. My phone buzzed against my chest, probably Megan wondering about my arrival time. We talked twice during the rotation, brief conversations through the platform's communication system. She'd sounded distant, distracted, but that wasn't unusual. 28 days apart took its toll on both of us. I pulled out my phone, muscle memory from 4 years of homecomings. Her number was already highlighted, ready to dial. "Almost home," I muttered to myself, watching the crew boat disappear into the Gulf's gray expanse. The house at 1247 Ocean View Drive sat quiet in the morning sun, Megan's Honda absent from the driveway. Not unusual. She'd mentioned staying at her sister's place while I was gone. Said she needed the company, didn't like being alone in the house for weeks at a time. I understood that. The silence after months underwater could be deafening. My key turned easily in the lock, but something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The air carried a faint scent. Cologne, maybe aftershave. Not mine. I used basic soap and called it good. This was something expensive, the kind of smell that lingered in department stores. "Megan?" I called, my voice echoing through empty rooms. The silence felt different than usual. Not the hollow emptiness of an unoccupied house, but something warmer, lived in. Like someone had just stepped out for coffee. I dropped my gear bag with a thud that seemed too loud, the sound bouncing off walls that should have absorbed it after weeks of stillness. The thermostat read 72 degrees. Why would she keep it that cool if she wasn't living here? Megan always complained about the electric bills, kept the house at 78 during summer months. The living room looked normal at first glance, but my eyes, trained to spot the smallest anomalies in underwater equipment, caught details that didn't fit. The couch cushions showed permanent impressions, not the neat arrangement Megan always maintained. Someone had been spending serious time on that sofa. I shuffled through 3 weeks of accumulated mail, my methodical nature guiding me to the utility bills first. Years of underwater precision work had made checking expenses second nature. When your life depends on monitoring gauges and systems, you develop habits that carry over topside. The electric bill made me blink twice, then read it again. $890 for the month. I ran my finger down the usage chart, comparing it to previous bills. Our normal summer usage ran around $320, maybe $380 during heat waves. This was nearly triple. "That can't be right," I whispered, pulling out the water bill. Similar story, usage spikes that made no sense for an empty house. The numbers didn't lie. During my absence, when this place should have been dark and quiet, someone had been using power and water like they lived here full time. My jaw tightened as I reached for my phone. Pressure don't lie. People do. Megan's voice carried that familiar defensive edge when she answered on the third ring. Background noise suggested she was in a car, maybe at a restaurant. "Cliff, you're back early." "Bills came in," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the growing knot in my stomach. "Electric's at $890 this month. Water's through the roof, too." "Of course the bills are high, Cliff." Her tone sharpened. "I had to come by for my things, and it's been hot. You know I can't sleep when it's stuffy." But her explanation felt thin as tissue paper. The usage patterns showed consistent daily consumption, not occasional visits. I'd studied enough system readouts to know the difference between intermittent and continuous operation. "You said you were staying at your sister's," I pressed, my underwater training keeping emotion out of my voice. "State facts, get facts back." "I am. I just needed my space to think, okay? About us. About what happens when you're gone all the time." The line crackled with tension thicker than the silence at 300 feet below the surface. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow like someone surfacing too fast. "Megan, the numbers don't add up. This usage pattern shows someone living here, not visiting. Are you calling me a liar?" Her voice rose, that sharp edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "I'm dealing with a lot right now, Cliff. Your job, your schedule, the way you just disappear for a month at a time. Maybe I needed the house to feel normal sometimes." The call ended with a click that echoed in the empty kitchen. Walking through the house with fresh eyes, I noticed details my exhausted brain had missed during the initial sweep. The coffee table bore a ring stain on the oak surface. Megan never drank coffee, said it made her jittery. She was strictly a tea person, Earl Grey with honey. In the kitchen, the trash contained takeout containers from Delacroix's Bistro, some upscale place downtown we'd never visited together. Too expensive for our budget, too fancy for my tastes. The containers were recent, maybe 2 days old based on the smell. The refrigerator held surprises too. Craft beer I'd never seen before, some imported brand with a label in French. Expensive cheese, the kind that came wrapped in fancy paper. Megan usually bought store brand everything, complained about grocery costs whenever I suggested trying something new. "Someone's been living here," I said to the empty room, my voice carrying the certainty of a man who'd spent years reading underwater gauges where mistakes meant death. The evidence was subtle but undeniable, like pressure changes that warned of equipment failure before alarms sounded. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Carlos's number. If someone was using my house while I was gone, I needed to know who and why. Carlos had contacts in security, guys who did surveillance work between diving contracts. The evidence was mounting like nitrogen in a diver's bloodstream, invisible at first, then suddenly critical. And just like decompression sickness, ignoring the signs could prove fatal. My hands shook slightly as I dialed Carlos's number. 20 years of marriage, and I was about to investigate my own wife like a suspicious equipment failure. But pressure don't lie, and these numbers were telling a story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The phone call with Carlos lasted 15 minutes, but it felt like decompression time. Slow, necessary, and somehow reassuring to have another set of eyes on the problem. Carlos had worked security between diving contracts, knew how to document evidence properly. "You need photos, timestamps, everything," he'd said. "And brother, you need to stay calm. Don't let her know you're onto anything until you have the full picture." I hung up and stared at the takeout containers again. Delacroix's Bistro. The name nagged at me like a loose fitting on a regulator, something I should recognize but couldn't place. I pulled out my phone and searched for the restaurant. Upscale French place downtown, the kind of spot that charged $30 for what we'd call a normal-sized steak. The guest bathroom had always been Megan's territory. She'd claimed it when we moved in, said she needed space for her beauty routine. I'd respected that boundary for 4 years, never really looking beyond the obvious cosmetics and hair products scattered across the marble countertop. Now, with suspicion driving my search, I opened the medicine cabinet with the careful precision of a man checking pressure gauges before a dive. Behind Megan's usual array of expensive creams and serums, stuff that cost more than my monthly truck payment, sat a bottle of men's cologne and a high-end razor I'd never seen before. "Aramis," I read aloud, turning the heavy glass bottle in my calloused hands. The cologne was half empty, suggesting regular use. The razor was one of those fancy German jobs, Probably cost more than my entire shaving kit. Someone had been getting very comfortable in my home, making themselves at home in ways that made my chest tight with rage. I photographed everything, just like Carlos had instructed. The cologne, the razor, their positions in the cabinet. Evidence, documentation. The same methodical approach I used for underwater repairs, where missing a detail could kill you. The bedroom felt like a crime scene under my scrutiny. I'd been too exhausted during my initial sweep to really look, but now every detail jumped out like warning lights on a dive console. The bed showed signs of regular use, sheets wrinkled in patterns that suggested two people, not one woman occasionally stopping by to feel normal. Megan's side of the bed held unfamiliar indentations in the memory foam, deeper impressions than her slight frame would create. Someone heavier had been sleeping there. A lot. In the hamper beside the bed, buried under Megan's workout clothes, my fingers found a men's undershirt. Size large. Cotton blend, expensive feel. Not mine. I wore medium and strictly cotton. The shirt had been worn recently. It still held the faint scent of that cologne from the bathroom. "What the hell, Megan?" The words came out as a growl, my usual stoic demeanor cracking like a pressure seal under too much depth. I held the shirt up to the light, looking for any identifying marks. Nothing. Just expensive fabric that proved someone else had been sleeping in my bed while I was risking my life 300 feet underwater. My hands shook slightly as I photographed the shirt, the indentations, the disturbed bedding. Each image felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but I needed the truth. Had to have it, the same way I needed accurate depth readings to avoid the bends. The linen closet yielded more evidence. Hidden behind towels that smelled of fabric softener I'd never bought, my fingers found 2 empty wine bottles. Caymus Cabernet Sauvignon, the price tag still attached, $80 each. Megan hated red wine, claimed it gave her headaches and made her feel sluggish. She was strictly a white wine drinker, usually the cheap stuff from the grocery store. These bottles showed lipstick traces on both rims, different shades. One coral pink that matched Megan's usual color, another deeper red I'd never seen her wear. 2 people had shared these expensive bottles, intimate dinners while I'd been breathing recycled air in a saturation chamber, trusting her to keep our home and our marriage intact. "Son of a bitch," I whispered, my voice echoing in the small closet. The evidence was mounting like pressure in a damaged diving bell, threatening to crush everything I'd believed about my marriage, my life, my future. I photographed the bottles, their positions, the lipstick traces. My phone's memory was filling up with proof of betrayal, each image a small death of the trust I'd built over 4 years of marriage. 4 years of working dangerous jobs to provide for us, to build something stable and lasting. The kitchen clock showed 3:47 p.m. Megan would be home tomorrow, her text had said. "Can't wait to see you." The words felt like mockery now, like lines from a script she'd been reading while entertaining someone else in our home. I sat on the couch, our couch, though that designation felt meaningless now, surrounded by evidence of betrayal. The utility bills spread across the coffee table like dive charts plotting a course through dangerous waters. The photographs on my phone documenting the physical proof of another man's presence in my space, my bed, my life. My mind processed the information with the methodical calm that kept me alive in crushing depths. The spike in utility usage during my absence, the expensive food and wine, men's toiletries and clothing hidden throughout the house. Someone had been living here, not just visiting. Someone who felt comfortable enough to leave personal items, to sleep in my bed, to treat my home like his own. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Megan. "Flight lands at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Making your favorite dinner. Love you." I stared at the message, knowing our marriage was already over, even if she didn't know it yet. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Like a catastrophic pressure failure, there was no repairing this kind of damage. You could only surface carefully and hoped to survive the aftermath. But first, I needed to know who. The cologne bottle, the expensive tastes, the comfortable familiarity with my house. This wasn't some random affair. This was someone with money, someone who could afford $80 wine and high-end toiletries. Someone who thought he could use my home as his personal retreat while I worked to pay for it. I picked up the takeout container from Delacroix's Bistro again, studying the logo more carefully. Something about that name still bothered me, like a detail I should remember but couldn't quite grasp. French restaurant, expensive, downtown location. The kind of place Megan had always said we couldn't afford, that was too fancy for people like us. Apparently, it wasn't too fancy for her and whoever she'd been entertaining in my absence. Tomorrow she'd be home, expecting everything to be normal, expecting me to welcome her back with the same trust and devotion I'd shown for 4 years. But the evidence scattered across my coffee table told a different story, one that ended with the marriage I thought was solid, crumbling like a poorly welded joint under pressure. The house felt different now, contaminated by knowledge I couldn't unknow. Every surface held potential evidence, every room a possible scene of betrayal. I'd spent my career working in environments where trust in your equipment meant the difference between life and death. Now I had to accept that the person I'd trusted most had been lying to me for God knows how long. I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, the kind I used for equipment checklists on the rig. The numbers didn't lie. They never did underwater, and they weren't lying now. 3 columns, my rotation dates, utility bills, and what should have been an empty house. The math was simple, brutal but simple. October rotation, 28 days offshore. Electric bill, $890. Water usage, 340% above normal. I drew a timeline with the precision of a dive plan. Every detail mattered when you're 300 feet down, and every detail mattered now. The house felt different since I'd found those wine bottles yesterday, contaminated by knowledge I couldn't unknow. Evidence log, day 1, I wrote at the top. My handwriting stayed steady despite the betrayal churning in my gut like bad nitrogen. The morning coffee tasted bitter. Through the window, I watched Mrs. Chen walking her terrier, same route as always. Normal people living normal lives while mine crumbled in systematic detail. My phone buzzed. Text from Megan. Miss you already. Staying at Sarah's tonight. Love you. I stared at the message, then at my timeline. If she was at her sister's, why did my water heater run for 6 hours straight yesterday? Why did the motion sensors trigger at 2 a.m.? The data didn't match her story. It never had. 28 days underwater, and I come home to lies wrapped in utility bills. The electronics store smelled like plastic in teenage desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like the hum of diving equipment, casting everything in harsh white light. You looking for home security? The clerk couldn't be more than 19, all acne and enthusiasm. Name tag read Tyler. Something like that. I picked up a wireless camera package, reading the specs. Night vision, motion activation, smartphone alerts. Everything I needed to document what was happening in my own house. Yeah, man, you never know who's watching your place these days. Tyler rang up 3 cameras and a GPS tracker. My mom got one of these after someone stole her Amazon packages. I nodded, thinking exactly. But I wasn't worried about package thieves. The total came to $247. I paid cash, watching Tyler's eyes widen slightly at the bills. Most people used cards these days, left digital trails. 20 years of underwater work taught you to think 3 moves ahead. You want the extended warranty? No. I signed the receipt with the same steady hand I used to sign off on explosive charges. This is a one-time job. My jaw ached from clenching as I walked to the truck. The parking lot stretched out like a dive platform, that moment before you step off into the unknown, when the water below could hide anything. I was entering dangerous waters again. But this time, the pressure came from betrayal, not the ocean depths. Back home, I installed the first camera in the living room bookshelf, angling it to capture the front door and most of the main area. The second went in our bedroom dresser, hidden behind a stack of Megan's magazines. The third covered the kitchen and back door. Each placement got tested twice, like setting charges on underwater pipelines, measure twice, detonate once. The house felt like a crime scene I was preparing to document. Every surface held potential evidence now. The couch where someone else had sat, the kitchen where someone else had cooked, the bed where... I stopped that thought cold. My phone showed 3 green dots, all cameras online, recording to cloud storage. The motion sensors would send alerts directly to my phone. Technology that would have seemed like science fiction when I started diving, now reduced to catching my wife in lies. I texted Megan, heading out tomorrow for 28-day rotation. Love you. The lie tasted metallic, like blood from a bitten tongue. But lies were her language now. Time I learned to speak it. Through the window, I watched the Hendersons loading groceries from their minivan, kids running around their legs. Simple, honest chaos. I envied them their problems, soccer practice and mortgage payments instead of surveillance cameras and betrayal. My phone buzzed with Megan's reply. Safe dive, baby. I'll miss you so much. Hearts and lies, delivered with equal sincerity. The first alert came at 2:47 a.m. I was in a Motel 6, 12 miles from home, lying fully clothed on scratchy sheets, waiting. The phone's buzz cut through the darkness like a decompression alarm. Camera 1. Motion detected. I opened the app with hands that didn't shake. Couldn't afford to shake, not when the truth was finally surfacing. Grainy footage showed my front door opening. Megan stepped inside, followed by a tall man in an expensive suit. Even in the low light, I recognized him from the real estate billboards around town. Marcus Delacroix, your luxury property specialist. They moved through my house like they owned it. Marcus's hand rested possessively on Megan's lower back as they headed toward the kitchen. Comfortable, familiar, practiced. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m., 6 hours after I'd supposedly left for my rotation. I watched them disappear into the kitchen, then reappear with wine glasses. My wine, from the bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. The motel room suddenly felt like a diving bell. Small, pressurized, isolated from the world above. But instead of nitrogen narcosis, I had betrayal flooding my system. Marcus said something that made Megan laugh. The sound carried clearly through the camera's audio, light and musical. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in months, maybe years. They headed toward the bedroom, and I closed the app. Some things you don't need to document. The coffee maker in the corner gurgled to life automatically. 3 a.m. brew cycle, programmed for offshore workers who lived on strange schedules. I poured a cup and sat in the room's single chair, staring at the blank TV screen. My reflection looked back, tired, weathered, 43 years old and suddenly very alone. For 3 days, I watched my marriage dissolve in real time through phone notifications. Marcus arrived every morning at 9 a.m. sharp, 30 minutes after my supposed departure time. He brought groceries, expensive wine, takeout from restaurants I couldn't afford. They cooked together in my kitchen, ate at my dining table, showered in my bathroom. The intimacy was worse than the betrayal. They had routines. Day 2. Marcus arrived with roses and Thai food. They ate on the couch, Megan's feet in his lap. She wore the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas, the one she claimed was too fancy for every day. Day 3. They cooked breakfast together. Actual breakfast, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, the works. Marcus wore my spare bathrobe, the terry cloth one hanging in the guest bathroom. They moved around each other with practiced ease, like they'd done this 100 times before, which they probably had. I took notes with the same precision I used for underwater repair logs. Times, activities, evidence. My heart pounded like decompression sickness, but my handwriting stayed steady. 9:15 a.m. Subject arrives with overnight bag. 9:45 a.m. Cooking breakfast together. 10:30 a.m. Shower. Bathroom camera offline, but audio suggests dual occupancy. The clinical language helped, made it feel like work instead of the systematic destruction of everything I'd built. On day 4, I drove to the bank. The bank manager spread Megan's account statements across her desk like crime scene photos. Janet Morrison, according to her nameplate, a nervous woman with wire-rimmed glasses who kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault. These transfers started 18 months ago, she explained, pointing to monthly withdrawals I'd never authorized. $2,000 every month to an account registered under, she checked her computer screen, M. Delacroix Holdings, LLC. The numbers blurred together as she walked me through the damage. $47,000 total. Our entire savings, plus my offshore bonuses from the last 2 years. Money I'd earned in the crushing darkness 300 feet below the surface, breathing recycled air and welding in conditions that could kill you if you made one mistake. Your wife has full access as joint account holder, Morrison added apologetically. These transactions are all perfectly legal from our perspective. Legal, but not honest. Can you print these statements? Of course, the printer hummed to life. Mr. Torino, I hope you understand. We can't reverse these transactions without both account holders' consent or a court order. I understand. I took the warm papers, still smelling of toner. Just needed to see the numbers. Morrison's expression softened. Sir, if you're having marital difficulties, there are resources. Thank you, ma'am. This is all I need. I walked out with evidence of systematic financial betrayal, my hands steady but my heart pounding like I'd surfaced too fast. The parking lot stretched out under October sun, normal people going about their normal banking. None of them had just discovered their spouse had been stealing their life savings to fund an affair. In my truck, I spread the statements across the passenger seat. The pattern was clear. Every withdrawal coincided with my offshore rotations. While I was underwater, earning the money, Megan was spending it on another man. The math was simple. Brutal, but simple. Just like everything else about this mess I used to call a marriage. I drove straight to the address Ray had given me, a diner off Highway 45 that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The kind of place where truckers and oil workers grabbed coffee at 4 a.m., where nobody asked questions and everybody minded their own business. Detective Ray Holbrook sat in the back corner booth, a manila folder thick as a phone book spread across the scratched Formica table. He looked exactly like Central Casting would order for retired cop turned PI. Gray mustache, weathered face, cheap suit that had seen better decades. But his eyes were sharp, alert, professional. Mr. Torino. He stood to shake my hand. Firm grip, calloused palms, working man's handshake. Coffee? Black. He flagged down a waitress who looked like she'd been working this shift since the Reagan years. 2 black coffees, darling. I slid into the booth across from him, eyeing the folder. What'd you find? Your wife's been busy. Ray opened the folder, revealing photographs printed on standard copy paper. The top image showed a silver BMW parked in my driveway, timestamp reading 10:47 a.m., October 3rd. Professional job. She's got this down to a science. He spread out more photos like he was dealing cards. Same BMW, different dates. October 5th, 9:15 a.m. October 8th, 2:30 p.m. October 12th, 11 a.m. The timestamps blurred together, but the pattern was clear as a dive log. 23 visits in the past 2 months, Ray said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Every single one corresponds with your offshore rotations. Not once did this vehicle appear when you were home. The waitress brought our coffee. I waited until she was out of earshot. License plate? Registered to Marcus Delacroix, age 34, address in River Oaks. Ray pulled out another sheet. Real estate developer. Owns Delacroix Development Group, worth about $2.3 million on paper. $2.3 million. I made good money underwater, but this guy was playing in a different league entirely. The coffee tasted bitter, or maybe that was just the information. Here's where it gets interesting. Ray flipped to a new section of photos. Your security cameras caught more than just the car. The next image showed a man in khakis and a polo shirt carrying an overnight bag up my front steps. Tall, lean, the kind of soft-handed look that screamed office work and country club memberships. Everything I wasn't. October 15th, 9:15 a.m., Ray continued. Arrives with luggage. Next photo is time-stamped 9:45 a.m. Kitchen window shows two people cooking breakfast together. My kitchen, my stove, my coffee maker. Gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Ray's voice stayed neutral, professional. October 16th, 10:30 a.m. Bathroom camera went offline for 40 minutes. Someone knew where it was and disabled it. But the audio pickup in the hallway suggests dual occupancy of your shower. I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. How long you been doing this kind of work, Ray? 22 years on the force, 8 years private. Seen a lot of marriages go sideways. He closed the folder. But this one's different. Most affairs are sloppy, emotional. This is calculated. Your wife planned every detail around your work schedule. The irony wasn't lost on me. I taught her about my rotation schedule, explained how the offshore industry worked, shared the details of my professional life. She'd used that information like a blueprint for betrayal. What else? Ray opened a second folder. Financial records. Your joint account shows regular transfers to M. Delacroix Holdings, LLC. $47,000 over 18 months. The timing matches his visits to your house. $47,000. My offshore bonuses, my overtime pay, my hazard compensation for working in conditions that could kill you if you made one mistake. All of it funneled to the man sleeping in my bed while I was 300 feet underwater, breathing recycled air and keeping the lights on in Texas. She's been paying him? Other way around. He's been paying her. Ray pulled out bank statements covered in yellow highlighter. $2,000 a month, like clockwork. Started 18 months ago. I studied the numbers, the dates, the systematic nature of the transactions. What's a real estate developer paying my wife $2,000 a month for? Ray's expression didn't change. Whatever it is, it's worth documenting. These statements, combined with the surveillance footage, paint a pretty clear picture for any divorce attorney. The diner hummed with ordinary conversation, truckers discussing routes, shift workers complaining about overtime. Normal people with normal problems. I envied them. There's more, Ray said quietly, but you might want to finish your coffee first. I pushed the cup away. Just tell me. He pulled out a final set of photos. These were different, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. Megan and Marcus walking hand in hand into a jewelry store. Megan trying on rings at what looked like an expensive restaurant. Marcus kissing her goodbye in the parking lot of a hotel. These were taken last week, while you were on the Chevron platform. The photos told a story I'd been too stupid or too trusting to see. This wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship, a life they were building together, using my money, my house, my absence. The hotel receipts show they've been taking weekend trips. Galveston, Austin, Dallas, always when you're offshore. Ray gathered the photos back into neat stacks. Your wife's living a double life, Mr. Torino, and she's gotten very good at it. I sat back in the booth, feeling like I'd surfaced too fast. The pressure in my chest wasn't decompression sickness. It was the weight of 15 years of marriage collapsing all at once. What do you recommend? Get yourself a good divorce attorney. Document everything. Don't confront her until you've got your legal ducks in a row. Ray closed both folders and slid them across the table. And whatever you do, don't let on that you know. People do stupid things when they're cornered. I took the folders, heavy with the weight of evidence. What do I owe you? We'll settle up after the divorce is final. Professional courtesy. One working man to another. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my truck with the folders on the passenger seat. The photos spilled out slightly, showing glimpses of my wife's secret life. The methodical nature of her betrayal was almost impressive. She'd planned this with the same precision I applied to underwater welding. Every detail calculated, every risk assessed, every contingency covered. Except she hadn't counted on me actually looking at the utility bills. I started the engine and drove toward downtown Houston, toward the law offices Ray had recommended. Time to turn this investigation into legal action. The game had rules, and I was finally ready to play. Jennifer Wu's office smelled like leather and legal documents, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with case law and family court precedents. She sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my truck, but her handshake was firm, and her eyes were sharp. No nonsense. Detective Holbrook speaks highly of your thoroughness, she said, opening the folders I'd brought. Let's see what we're working with. I watched her face as she reviewed the evidence. Bank statements, surveillance photos, financial records. Her expression stayed neutral, professional, but I caught the slight nod of approval as she flipped through Ray's documentation. This is exceptional work, she said finally. Bank records, surveillance footage, witness statements. You've built a solid foundation for litigation. The word litigation hit different than divorce. Made it sound like what it was. A legal battle where evidence mattered more than emotions. Texas is a community property state, Jennifer continued, pulling out a yellow legal pad. Generally, assets acquired during marriage are split 50-50, but adultery affects spousal support calculations. She wrote notes in precise handwriting while she talked. With this level of documentation, we can argue for a disproportionate division of assets. The systematic nature of her deception, the financial transfers, the use of marital property for extramarital activities, it all supports our position. Our position. I like the sound of that. What's the timeline look like? Depends on how she responds to the filing. If she contests, we're looking at 6 to 12 months. If she's smart and takes a settlement, Jennifer shrugged. Could be done in 90 days. I thought about Megan's personality, her need to control every situation. She'll contest. Then we'll be ready. Jennifer tapped the folders with her pen. This evidence tells a clear story. Systematic financial betrayal, adultery, misuse of marital assets. Any judge will see the pattern. The legal process felt familiar somehow, methodical, step by step, like underwater demolition work. You planned every detail, placed your charges precisely, then triggered the sequence that brought down the structure. Clean, efficient, devastating. One more thing, Jennifer said, pulling out a business card. Given the immigration implications Detective Holbrook mentioned, you might want to consult with Patricia Vance. She handles immigration law. If your wife's visa status is questionable. She left the sentence hanging, but I understood. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. Set up the meeting. That evening, I drove back to the house I'd been avoiding for 3 days. Megan's car sat in the driveway like nothing had changed, like she wasn't systematically destroying everything we'd built together. I parked across the street and pulled out my phone. The security app showed the house was occupied, motion sensors active in the kitchen and living room. She was home, probably cooking dinner, playing the role of faithful wife for an audience of one. My phone buzzed with a text from Carlos, my dive partner. Heard you're taking extended shore leave. Everything okay? I typed back. Handling some personal business. Back on rotation next month. Roger that. Let me know if you need anything. Carlos was good people. The kind of guy who'd lend you his truck or help you move without asking questions. But this wasn't the kind of problem you could fix with friendship and elbow grease. This required precision, patience, and legal expertise. Inside the house, lights moved from room to room as Megan went about her evening routine. The same routine she'd performed for 4 years, except now I knew it was all performance. Every "I love you," every "be safe out there," every kiss goodbye before my offshore rotations, all of it calculated to maintain the cover story while she lived her real life with Marcus. The immigration paperwork Jennifer had mentioned sat in a manila envelope on my passenger seat. Tomorrow, I'd find out just how deep this deception went. But tonight, I sat in my truck and watched my wife move through the house I'd bought, using the electricity I'd paid for, living the life I'd made possible. The irony was almost perfect. I provided everything she needed to betray me. The working man's curse. Build something solid, and someone will find a way to tear it down. I started the engine and drove back to the motel. Tomorrow, I'd start building my case with the same methodical precision I used 300 feet underwater. No mistakes, no shortcuts, no room for error. The pressure was on. Time to see who could handle it better. I sat at my kitchen table, the immigration documents spread before me like evidence at a crime scene. The morning light caught the official seals and stamps, all dated 18 months before our wedding. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I couldn't stop tracing the timeline with my finger. Megan Torino, née Kowalski. Student visa expired May 15th, 2019. Marriage certificate dated September 3rd, 2020. The math was simple, brutal in its clarity. She'd needed citizenship, and I was her solution. The methodical part of my mind that keeps me alive 300 feet underwater started cataloging every lie, every calculated smile, every time she touched my arm and called me baby with that slight accent I'd found so charming. The house felt different now, contaminated by deception. Every surface held memories that were suddenly suspect. The couch where she'd curled up against me during movies, the kitchen counter where she'd kissed me goodbye before my rotations. I heard her key in the lock. Right on schedule. Megan entered with shopping bags from Nordstrom, humming something soft and melodic. Designer labels peeked out from tissue paper, more evidence of where my money had gone. She froze when she saw the papers scattered across our kitchen table like playing cards in a rigged game. Her face cycled through surprise, calculation, then something harder. Defiance. "You went through my private documents?" she asked, setting down the bags with deliberate calm. Her voice carried that slight tremor she got when cornered, but her posture remained straight, shoulders back. I didn't answer. Just slid the visa application across the table, the one with her signature and a date circled in red ink from my pen. The paper made a soft scraping sound against the wood. She glanced at it, then back at me, her chin lifting slightly. The air between us crackled with unspoken accusations. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and fell silent. "So you know," she said, pulling out the chair across from me. She sat with the confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this moment, back straight, hands folded. "I married you for papers, but you got something too. A beautiful wife who made you look successful." Her voice was steady, matter of fact, like discussing the weather or grocery lists. My hands clenched on the table, knuckles going white against the dark wood. She continued, "You think this makes you the victim? You were getting the better deal, Cliff. Look at you." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Her perfume, expensive, not the drugstore brand she'd worn when we met, filled the space between us. Chanel No. 5, I'd learned from the credit card statements. $60 an ounce. I pulled out the bank statements, sliding them across like evidence in a deposition. $47,000, Megan. My voice stayed controlled, professional, the same tone I used reporting equipment failures to Topside. She glanced at the numbers without flinching, as if I'd shown her a grocery receipt. I earned that money, she said, her accent thickening slightly the way it did when she was angry or excited. 4 years of pretending to be happy with a man who smells like diesel fuel and talks about water pressure at dinner parties. The words hit harder than any physical blow. They had weight, substance, like the pressure that could crush a man's chest at depth. She'd been rehearsing this, I realized, planning her exit speech while I was welding pipes in the Gulf. You're embarrassed by me, I said. The realization crushed down like water pressure at 300 feet, that slow, inexorable force that could kill you if you weren't careful. Megan's mask finally slipped. Her perfectly composed expression cracked, and years of suppressed contempt spilled through like water through a failed seal. Yes, her voice rose, echoing off the kitchen walls. Do you know what it's like introducing you to people? My husband, the underwater janitor. They look at me with pity, Cliff. Pity. She stood up, pacing to the window, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. Marcus owns buildings. He speaks 3 languages. He doesn't come home covered in grease, talking about nitrogen narcosis and decompression chambers like their fascinating dinner conversation. The kitchen erupted in her fury. 4 years of fake smiles and forced affection exploding into brutal honesty. She gestured wildly, her jewelry catching the morning light. You want to know the truth? I haven't been happy a single day of this marriage. Not one. Every time you touch me, every time you try to hold my hand at those horrible barbecues with your boring friends, I'm counting the days until I can file for divorce without losing my status. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the impact. In saturation diving, when something goes catastrophically wrong, you don't panic. You assess, you adapt, you survive. The same protocols applied here. She was breathing hard now, her chest rising and falling like she'd been running. Her face was flushed, more animated than I'd seen her in months. This was the most honest she'd been since our wedding day. Marcus makes me laugh, she continued, her voice dropping to something almost tender. He takes me to places where people wear real jewelry, drive cars that cost more than your annual salary. He doesn't grunt responses or spend 20 minutes explaining why the water tastes different after you've been underwater. I looked at my hands, scarred, calloused, permanently stained with traces of metal and grease. Hands that had built things, fixed things, provided for her. Hands she was ashamed to be seen holding. How long? I asked. 2 years. No hesitation, no shame. Since that Christmas party at the Petroleum Club, he was everything you're not. Sophisticated, successful, interesting. 2 years, half our marriage. Every rotation I'd done, every dangerous job I'd taken to build our savings. She'd been planning my replacement. The betrayal had layers, like nitrogen building in a diver's bloodstream, invisible at first, then suddenly lethal. The words hung in the air like toxic gas in a confined space. 2 years. I felt something shift inside my chest, a pressure change that had nothing to do with depth. So Marcus is your upgrade, I said quietly, my voice carrying the same steady rhythm I used during emergency ascents. Megan straightened her shoulders, and for the first time in months, she looked directly at me. He's my future. You were just temporary. She stood, smoothing her designer dress with practiced movements. The morning light streaming through the kitchen window revealed how much she'd changed. The subtle makeup that cost more than my work boots, the expensive highlights that caught the light just so, the confidence that comes from having an escape plan funded by someone else's labor. She was already gone, just occupying the same space out of necessity. I pulled out the utility bills from the stack on the table, my movements deliberate as laying out dive equipment, each document placed with precision, creating a pattern she couldn't ignore. $890 for electricity when the house should be empty. Megan's eyes flickered, the first crack in her composure since she'd started talking. And the water bill. I set down another statement. 300% increase. Funny thing about numbers, they don't lie. I spread the evidence methodically, each bill a piece of the puzzle she thought I'd never solve. You've been living here with him while I'm 300 feet underwater, working to pay for your love nest. My voice carried the weight of every dangerous job I'd taken, every extra shift to build our savings, every time I'd pushed past safe limits to provide for what I thought was our future. You want to play detective? Megan snapped, her control fraying like a worn safety line. Fine. Yes, Marcus stays here. Yes, we use your precious utilities. You're gone 28 days at a time. What did you expect? She paced the kitchen like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the tile with sharp staccato beats. Each step an accusation, each turn a dismissal of everything I'd sacrificed. I was supposed to sit here alone, grateful for your scraps of attention, grateful for your grunts and your stories about pressure differentials. The house felt like a crime scene now, every corner contaminated by their deception. The kitchen where I'd made her coffee every morning before leaving for jobs. The living room where we'd watched movies on the couch I'd bought with overtime pay. All of it poisoned. I stood slowly, my full height imposing in the small kitchen. The same presence that commanded respect on dive teams, that kept crews alive in crisis situations. You could have divorced me. My voice was deadly calm, the tone I used when explaining life or death procedures to new divers. No emotion, just facts. Megan laughed, sharp and bitter as the taste of recycled air. And give up half of everything? Your pension, the house equity, the savings? She counted on her manicured fingers like an accountant tallying assets. This way I get what I deserve and my freedom. Marcus has lawyers, Cliff. Good ones. We've been planning this properly. The calculation in her voice was chilling. She wasn't just leaving. She was executing a business plan that happened to involve destroying my life. Every tender moment, every time she'd kissed me goodbye before a rotation, had been performance art designed to keep me working while she built her exit strategy. Planning, I repeated. How long have you been planning? Since before we got married. She said it like discussing the weather. You think I wanted to spend my life married to a blue-collar nobody? The wedding was just paperwork, Cliff. A green card with benefits. The front door opened with a familiar creak, and Carlos Mendez's voice called out, Cliff, your truck's in the driveway, brother. His work boots echoed through the hallway, heavy, purposeful steps that belonged to a man who'd never apologize for the honest work that paid his bills. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene with the quick assessment of someone used to reading dangerous situations. Scattered papers, Megan's defensive posture, my rigid stance. His dark eyes moved to the immigration documents spread across the table, and his expression hardened like steel, cooling after welding. Megan, he said carefully, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through years of keeping dive teams alive. Maybe you should pack some things. His presence shifted the dynamic immediately, adding weight to my side of the equation. Megan's confidence wavered for the first time since her confession began. She was outnumbered now, her sanctuary invaded by witnesses to her betrayal. Carlos crossed his arms, his scarred hands visible beneath rolled-up sleeves. How long have you known about this, Cliff? Just figured it out. I gestured to the evidence. Numbers don't lie. No, they don't. Carlos picked up one of the utility bills, his eyes scanning the figures with the same precision he used to calculate decompression schedules. Been wondering about some things myself. He looked directly at Megan. Like how you always knew exactly when Cliff's rotations ended, down to the hour. Most wives have to wait for their husbands to call. Megan's face flushed. I keep track of his schedule. Funny thing, Carlos continued, his voice steady as a dive computer reading. I've been keeping track too. Been suspicious for months, actually. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. See, when your dive partner's wife starts asking detailed questions about job schedules, rotation dates, exactly which platform we're working, well, that raises flags. My chest tightened. What kind of questions? The kind someone asks when they're planning around your absence. Carlos opened the envelope, revealing photographs, bank statements, more utility records. I started documenting things. Thought you should know what was happening in your own house. Megan's face went pale beneath her expensive makeup. You've been spying on me? I've been looking out for my dive partner, Carlos said simply. Same way he'd look out for me if someone was planning to rob me blind. He spread the new evidence across the table like cards in a winning hand. Bank withdrawals that coincide with your husband's departures. Credit card charges at restaurants you claim you never visit. Hotel receipts for rooms booked under your maiden name. I stared at the photographs. Megan and Marcus at expensive restaurants, holding hands across candlelit tables while I was working in the crushing darkness of the Gulf floor. You've been planning this exit strategy since before we married, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place with mechanical precision. Megan's designer facade cracked completely. You don't understand what it's like being married to someone like you. Someone like me. I repeated her words, tasting the contempt she'd hidden for 4 years. Someone who works for a living. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. 4 years of marriage reduced to evidence scattered across a table, each document a nail in the coffin of everything I thought was real. Carlos folded his arms, his presence solid and reassuring in the wreckage of my domestic life. She's been using you, brother. This whole marriage was a con job from day one. My truck rumbles down Highway 45, the diesel engine's steady growl mixing with the whistle of Gulf wind through the cracked passenger window. Megan sits beside me, fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger like she's trying to polish away 4 years of lies. The manila envelope rests on the dashboard between us, thick with evidence she doesn't know exists yet. I'm glad we're doing this, Cliff. Her voice carries that careful tone she uses when she wants something. I know things have been difficult between us lately. I keep my eyes on the asphalt ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles show white against the black rubber. The cab smells like my work gear. Diesel fuel, salt air, and the metallic tang of welding equipment. She steals glances at my profile, probably wondering why I haven't said a word since we left the house. The envelope holds 2 years of Detective Holbrook's work. Every receipt, every photograph, every bank statement that will destroy the carefully constructed lie she calls our marriage. My fingers tap against the steering wheel, counting off the beats like a decompression schedule. The traffic's lighter than I expected, she continues, filling the silence. We might even be early for Dr. Morrison. 20 miles from town, I signal and pull into the Galveston Bay rest stop. The truck's tires crunch over oyster shell gravel as I park facing the Gulf. Oil rigs dot the horizon like metal islands, their lights already flickering in the late afternoon haze. Megan's confusion hits immediately. Why are we stopping? She checks her phone. Dr. Morrison's office is another 30 minutes down the road. I cut the engine and reach for the manila envelope. My movements are deliberate, methodical. The same precision I use checking equipment before a saturation dive. The silence stretches between us like a held breath. A pelican glides past the windshield, riding the thermals off the water. We're not going to counseling, Megan. My voice carries the flat certainty of someone who's already calculated every variable, checked every connection, verified every piece of evidence twice. Her face pales as understanding begins to dawn. The color drains from her cheeks like water leaving a flooded compartment. What do you mean? We have an appointment. No. I open the envelope and pull out the first stack of documents. We have a reckoning. The bank statements spread across the dashboard like playing cards in a winning hand. Each page lands with surgical precision, the paper making soft whispers against the vinyl. Megan's breathing quickens as she recognizes her own signatures, her own lies made tangible in black ink. $47,000. I tap the highlighted total on the joint savings statement. Gone. The Gulf wind rattles the truck windows, carrying the smell of salt and crude oil from the refineries. Megan's hands flutter toward the documents, then pull back like she's afraid they'll burn her. Cliff, I can explain. Nordstrom. My finger traces the first transaction. March 15th. $1,200 while I was on the Titan platform. The next receipt. Tiffany. April 3rd. $800 for earrings. Another page. The Petroleum Club. Monthly membership. 6 months running. Each document forms another piece of the paper wall between us, each receipt a nail in her coffin. Her hands shake as she finally reaches for the statements, scanning the numbers like she's seeing them for the first time. All while I was 300 feet underwater, I continue, my voice steady as a dive computer readout. Thinking you were home, missing me. Thinking you were proud of the money I was earning for our future. She's crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks like oil spills. It's not what it looks like. I was building our future. The words taste bitter. That's what you always said. The immigration documents hit the dashboard last, and Megan's composure shatters completely. The visa papers flutter in the Gulf breeze coming through the window crack. Her student visa application, stamped with dates that don't lie. Your student visa expired 5 years ago. My voice remains steady, professional, like I'm reporting depth readings to surface control. 6 months before we even met at that coffee shop. She's sobbing now, her whole body shaking. The sound echoes in the truck cab, mixing with the distant crash of waves against the seawall. You married me for papers, not love. The accusation hangs in the salt air between them. Everything, the wedding in Vegas, the honeymoon, 4 years of I love you, all calculated fraud. Her hands cover her face, shoulders heaving. Cliff, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pull out another stack of papers. Patricia Vance, immigration attorney. She's very thorough in her notes about your case. Megan tries to salvage what's left, her voice desperate and pleading through the tears. Cliff, please, it wasn't all fake. I do love you. I learned to love you. I slide the surveillance photos across the dashboard, cutting off her words. Marcus Delacroix's silver BMW in our driveway, time-stamped and dated. Her face in the passenger seat, laughing at something he said. The images tell the story she thought was secret. Detective Holbrook is very thorough, too. 23 separate visits during my offshore rotations. Intimate dinners at restaurants I could never afford. Weekend getaways to the woodlands while I worked double shifts to pay for her lifestyle. A life built entirely on my absence and money. She stops trying to explain and just stares at her own betrayal spread across the dashboard. The photos show everything. Her hand on his arm, their faces close together, her wearing the earrings from Tiffany while sitting in his car. 4 years, Megan. I gather the evidence back into neat stacks. 4 years of me thinking I wasn't good enough, wasn't making you happy. Turns out I was just the ATM. The Gulf wind picks up, rocking the truck slightly. Seagulls cry in the distance, their voices sharp and mocking. Megan sits frozen, staring at the oil rigs on the horizon like she's seeing them for the first time. The silence stretches like the distance between surface and seabed. Megan wipes her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek like oil stains on deck plating. What happens now? Her voice cracks like metal under pressure. I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out the manila envelope Jennifer Wu prepared yesterday. The legal documents slide across the dashboard with the same finality as a dive bell hitting bottom. Jennifer Wu filed the papers yesterday morning. My voice carries the same calm I use when reporting equipment failures to surface control. Immigration fraud, wire fraud, theft by deception. Megan's face goes white as she reads the charges. Her hands shake as she turns each page, the legal language precise and unforgiving. The federal seal at the top of each document makes it real. No more pretending, no more explanations. 5 years federal prison, full deportation, forfeiture of all marital assets. Each consequence lands like a depth charge, the pressure waves spreading through the truck cab. That's if you're lucky. She stares at the papers like they're written in a foreign language. You can't. This isn't. Cliff, please, we can work this out. The bank accounts are frozen. The house is in my name only. Checked the deed yesterday. Your credit cards were canceled this morning. I've dismantled her entire American dream with the same methodical precision I used to repair oil rig foundations 300 feet underwater. Megan's desperation transforms into something uglier. Her mask finally slips away completely, revealing the calculating woman who always lived beneath the surface. You think you're so smart, don't you? Her voice turns sharp, cutting. Just because you can weld underwater doesn't make you better than me. You're still just some blue-collar nobody who what? I turned to face her fully for the first time since we got in the truck. Who worked 60-hour weeks so you could spend $47,000 on jewelry and clothes. Who lived in a compression chamber for weeks at a time so you could play house with your boyfriend. Her face twists with fury and fear. I needed those papers, Cliff. You don't understand what it's like to have nothing, to come from nothing. I understand theft. The words cut through her justifications like a plasma torch through steel plate. I understand fraud. I understand betrayal. She tries a different approach, her voice turning pleading again. Marcus loves me. He'll take care of me. He has money. Marcus doesn't know about the immigration charges yet. I let the words settle like silt on the ocean floor. But he will. Rich men don't date federal fugitives, Megan. They don't marry women facing deportation. The realization hits her like decompression sickness. Sudden, brutal, and completely debilitating. Her carefully constructed backup plan evaporates like morning mist over the Gulf. Marcus Delacroix, with his real estate empire and country club memberships, will disappear the moment he learns she's facing federal charges. No. The word comes out as barely a whisper. No, he wouldn't. We have plans. You had plans. Past tense. I start the engine, the diesel rumbling back to life. I'll drop you at the bus station. Your flight to Montreal leaves Thursday morning. Even my mercy is methodical, planned to the last detail. Jennifer Wu arranged everything. The one-way ticket, the temporary travel documents, the coordination with immigration and customs enforcement. Clean, efficient, final. Megan stares out at the oil rigs on the horizon, their lights twinkling like distant stars in the afternoon haze. She's beginning to understand that she underestimated the depths of the man she married and betrayed. How long have you known? Her voice is barely audible above the engine noise. 6 months of suspicion, 2 months of certainty. The truck pulls back onto Highway 87, carrying us toward her exile and my hollow victory. The utility bills were the first crack in your story. Everything else just surfaced from there. The 20-minute drive to the Greyhound station passes in silence. Megan clutches her designer purse like a life preserver, probably calculating what she can sell to survive her first few weeks back in Canada. The irony isn't lost on me. All those expensive purchases, bought with my money, now her only assets. The bus station parking lot feels like a decompression chamber, that liminal space between one world and another, where pressure equalizes and reality sets in. The diesel fumes and exhaust create a haze that matches the fog in my head. I park near the terminal entrance but leave the engine running. Neither of us moves to get out. I never meant for it to go this far. The lie sounds hollow even to her. I don't respond. Just stare through the windshield at the Greyhound buses lined up like metal coffins, their destinations painted in bold letters. Dallas, Houston, New Orleans. Places where people start over, or try to. Megan opens the passenger door, the hinges creaking like rigging under strain. She pauses with one foot on the asphalt, looking back at me one last time. Cliff, don't. I keep my eyes forward. Just don't. She steps out into the Texas heat and uncertainty. The door closes with mechanical finality, the sound echoing in the truck cab like a hatch sealing shut. I don't watch her walk toward the terminal with her single suitcase and shattered plans. Some depths you don't surface from. I sit in the parking lot for another 10 minutes, engine idling, watching strangers board buses bound for anywhere but here. My phone buzzes. A text from Carlos asking if I want to grab dinner. Normal life, trying to reassert itself like pressure equalizing after a deep dive. The house on Ocean View Drive will be empty when I get back. Truly empty this time, not just pretending to be. I'll change the locks again, cancel the security system, maybe get a dog. Fill the silence with something honest. Victory tastes like seawater and rust. I want everything. The house, the money, my dignity, my revenge. Megan lost her residency status, her affair partner, her future in America. The system worked exactly as designed. But driving back toward Galveston, past the refineries and chemical plants that define this stretch of coast, I understand what I really accomplished. I saved my assets and destroyed my capacity to trust. I protected my money and murdered my ability to love. The oil rigs on the horizon grow larger as I approach home, their lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Tomorrow I'll call Deep Sea Industrial Solutions and request the longest rotation they have available. 60 days underwater sounds about right. Down there, in the crushing darkness where only competence matters, I won't have to pretend that winning